Every transaction, a line in the sand, a permanent record across the whole land. They're watching your wallet, they're tracking your spend, a story they're writing that you'll never amend. They build up a profile, they know what you bought, your patterns, your habits, a fish to be caught in a dragnet of data, a transparent cage, another performer on history's stage. But there's a whisper, a flicker of code, a different solution, a new way to load, a digital ghost in the heart of the machine, to make all your history completely insane. We move in the shadows, a ghost in the wire, burning the ledgers with digital fire, with the ring signatures masking the trail that we blaze, lost in Monero's untraceable haze. This ain't for the cloud, this is for liberty, true fungibility, for you and for me. A Bitcoin is public, a postcard you send, read by your enemies, family and friends. A dollar is tainted by where it has been, a history log, the original sin. But this is a sealed note, an envelope tight, a stealth address burning in digital night. Each coin is a fresh start, untainted and clean, the way that all currency should have always been. Yeah, there's a whisper, a flicker of code, a different solution, a whole new episode, a digital ghost in the heart of the machine, to make all your history completely unseen. We move in the shadows, a ghost in the wire, burning the ledgers with digital fire, with ring signatures masking the trail that we blaze, lost in Monero's untraceable haze. This ain't for the cloud, this is for liberty, true fungibility, for you and for me. They'll say it's for criminals, they'll spread all their lies, but they fear the freedom they can't supervise. It's for the activists, the journalists too, the people whose speech must be guarded and true, in a world that is watching your every last move. Sometimes the shadows are all you can prove.
What up, Vigilantes? There is a network in all of crypto that I personally love the most, and that is Monero, because more than its technology, it's community. And I have here with me Mr. X and Tuxsudo of Cake Wallet. to talk about what's been going on with Monero. There's a lot of fun happening within Monero, and it's led me to the conclusion that there's been an orchestrated attack against Monero. So I want to welcome Tuxsudo and Mr. X. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So,
Doing great.
Mr. X, as you know, is my partner at the Crypto Vigilante, and Tuxsudo works with Cake Wallet. What's your position with Cake Wallet? What do you do with Cake Wallet?
I'm kind of a designer, developer. I help a lot with UI design, designing like the interface for new features, and then I do a little bit of infrastructure management here and there, and a little bit of development, but mostly involved with designing.
Awesome. So, given that there's a lot of people asking questions as to what's happening with Monero, Tuxedo, could you please take us through a brief synopsis as to what has happened with Monero, with Qubic, and everything that they're claiming to have accomplished of a 51% attack, which really is not?
Yeah, so there's this chain, Qubic, and they had a lot of talk a couple months ago. Some people picked it up. A lot of people ignored it. Some people purposefully ignored it because they could see early on that they just wanted attention. And then somewhere along the line, they decided they were going to start kind of mining Monero at certain times, depending on what they want to do with their network. But recently, a couple days ago, I think it was coming into August 11th, so August 10th, very late at night, they claimed that they successfully executed over 51% of the total network hash rate on Monero, which we can easily verify is not true. They are a concerning force, I would say. They do have a decent amount of hash rate, which at peak times did look like it got between 35 and 40%. It's hard to tell exactly because they aren't giving us really truthful numbers on their part on their own hash rate. And then, of course, the total network hash rate. But they have had enough hash rate that's been a concern because they have been able to screw with the network a certain amount. And we have seen a couple reasonably deep reorgs. We saw a couple 6-block reorgs and we saw a single 7-block reorg, which is definitely not ideal. But their claims are false on 51% attack. They did not actually get that high of a hash rate. And so because of that, they couldn't do anything seriously damaging like fork the chain or do double spend attacks. So that's kind of a brief overview of what happened, I guess, over the past couple of days.
So do these reorgs, do they affect Monero at all? Because in conversations with Mr. X, and maybe Mr. X can answer this, Monero has almost like a security measure of 10 blocks of time where we have to wait around 20 minutes to process another transaction from your wallet, which is almost like a feature of security. And since they were not able to go beyond that 10 block a space and time, I guess the situation wasn't as serious as it could have been. Mr. X, maybe you can explain more about that, or Tuxedo?
Yeah, I mean, the bad part would be is if they did actually get 51% and they were able to do reorgs larger than 10 blocks, because then that could actually screw with people spending their XMR. Now, they still can screw with the network doing smaller reorgs. So, for example, if you had sent a transaction in blocks that were then got reorged to their empty blocks that they were mining, your transaction would end back in the mempool, is my understanding. And if you are a service that does only accept a few comps, if you wait only a few confirmations before giving out a product or giving out whatever it is you do, that could have affected you potentially there. But if you're using Monero as it's been spec'd out, as it's intended, yes, you are correct. That is why there is a 10-block lock for exactly reasons like this. There is 10 blocks until you are able to spend the outputs again. So if I send you some XMR, you have to wait 10 blocks before you can actually spend that again. For this very reason.
Okay, so given that they were able to achieve up to a 7-block reorg, is there concern that they could go further?
There is concern that they could go further for sure, depending on like what kind of improved incentives they can provide for mining on Qubic. To me, it doesn't look like they've actually managed to take that much existing hash rate from Monero, but they have got a lot of new hash rate in that is been adding up quite a lot over the past several weeks, I would say. And depending on what happens, they do have a chance that they could potentially pull even more in. But I will also say that Qubic's reward emission is having, to my understanding, they're having a halving on the 20th. So August 20th, mining Qubic will become somewhat less profitable.
Okay, and will it still be more profitable than mining Monero at even after the halving?
Yeah, it will be, just because you're getting that Qubic reward as well. But it won't be as profitable as it is now, unless it pumps a lot, and then it could potentially make up for it. But I don't necessarily see that happening. It has pumped a good amount over the past month because of this media attention that they've been working at. But they'll have a lot to make up for that halving.
So I was having a conversation with Mr. X yesterday, and I said, hey, why don't people just mine Qubic and with the proceeds buy more Monero? Would that be? And then he told me that Arctic Mine came up with that as a possible option that people have in the market. But then again, it's like, well, then you're still kind of aiding a pool that could cause harm to the network.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's like, yeah, you'll improve the price of Monero potentially, but then just immediately you're dumping the Qubic coin, which is de-incentivizing, their price and their profitability, and you're bumping up Monero. But at the same time, you're giving them hash rate, which then can bring to that concern of, could they actually get to 51%? So it's kind of an interesting idea, and I could see it being beneficial as long as the hash rate does remain under a certain amount. But we can see, even though they haven't 51%ed, they haven't gotten there. They've gotten around 36, maybe 40%. It's hard to tell exactly. Even then, they're still able to screw with the network a little bit and cause a lot of concern. Like, once again, it's not the end of the world. What they're saying, what their claims are online is largely false. There's this image that's been going around that is showing 2.8 gigahash a second on their pool, and then like 5.3 gigahash total network hash rate, and then 52% of the total network hash. But what we know is, if we actually take a look at miningpoolstats.stream, which is a good, reliable website that they just check public APIs that these pools provide, and they can look into their hash rate and see details, and create charts on like how much hash rate's gone over like the past week. If we actually take a look over the past 7 days of history, what we see is that pool mining has not gone below, like alternative to Qubic, all the other pools together has not gone below 3.7 gigahash. And to actually 51%, of course, it's not that you take the existing hash rate, cut it in half, and then do that. You have to literally double the entire network's hash rate. And so if Qubic actually did 51%, they would have had to match that and then add a little bit to it. And we didn't see that happening. We saw them get up to, assuming their numbers are correct, I have reason to believe that they might be lying, given what they're claiming so far. But with their number of 2.8 gigahash, they're still at least missing at least 1 gigahash. I think they're probably missing at least a couple gigahash, which is a lot. That's a lot more to add, and that costs a lot of money. So yeah, they're concerning to a degree, and yeah, they've gotten a good amount of hash, but they're lying. And I kind of think the reason they're doing this is, there's a lot of speculation. We don't know exactly the reason, but I think part of the reason they're lying right now is that by doing this right now and taking advantage of this situation to try and lie about their 51% attack, they can actually make it easier to do a real 51% attack in the future, because by spreading all this FUD and all this propaganda, they're actually managed to drive the price down of Monero a little bit. Well, I wouldn't say a little bit, actually a good amount. Monero's down, I think, 10% over the past 7 days. And by doing that, they're actually making it easier for them to 51% attack if they wanted to, because if the price of Monero keeps falling, like miners who mine on the existing pools, they might just drop out. And, it's not that the hash rate's tied directly to the price, but Monero isn't it's reasonably profitable, but if it falls like back to 200, it'll lose a lot of profitability, and some of these miners might drop out, and that's just going to make it even easier for them. So I think that's partially why they're doing this push in this lie right now. Ultimately, why Qubic is doing this, I don't really know. I think you guys probably have some interesting theories. Maybe coordinated attack. It might just be a disenfranchised individual who wants to pump their shitcoin and make some money. Don't really know. But one of the things that they are using is that they managed to mine 51 blocks within this arbitrary 100 block period. And they're using that to say that we got a 51% attack. But really, that was kind of luck. Like, you're able to do that because of how the distribution works. You're able to do that with luck with around like 30 to 40% of hash rate. That's not totally unreasonable. They got lucky, sure. But just because they got 51 out of 100 blocks for this arbitrary period of time, that does not mean that they actually 51%ed the total hash rate of the network.
So one of the best things that the Monero community has always had going for itself is the culture of honesty that you guys have always fostered, and that's very rare in crypto because everyone is ready to shill you why their network is the best. Whereas the Monero person, it's almost in their adherence to the false ethos, they're more ready to tell you what could possibly go wrong in the future. And it's a very special culture, and because of that culture, you guys, the audience, can see how Tuxsudo is so candid and honest, and but that is a virtue that the Monero community has, and I just wanted to point that out. That even in this conversation, the way you've expressed yourself and talked about it, that's really like what makes Monero powerful, in my opinion. Is that there's a notion of trust and a reverence for the false ethos. So I do, that's what makes me love Monero, is really the culture, that mindset. And the first thing that comes to mind is, and you mentioned that we could have various theories about this, but do you know who funded Qubic, who's behind it, what entities? I've tried to do research on this. I really couldn't find anything. I even went on Crunchbase and try to figure out who these guys were, who was funding this, where did it come from. I didn't have any luck. Do you, Mr. X, or do you, Tuxsudo? Do you guys have an idea of where Qubic comes from?
I mean, if Mr. X has any information, I'd love to hear what he has to say. I did see some information. I think some of it wasn't true. That there was potentially some U.S.-Israeli joint venture funding that I guess somebody managed to get out of Grok. But I haven't confirmed that claim. I don't know how much of that is actually true. But beyond that, I haven't really looked into their funding that much. But it would be very interesting to actually dig a little deeper and find out. But if Mr. X has any info on that, I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, no, I don't really have anything else. Like you mentioned, I did see that AI generated theory with the Israeli firms and stuff, but that was, I don't know if that, I didn't see any evidence of it. It was just like some rumor from Twitter or something, I think.
So what's strange is that this happens right at the time where we see a lot of delistings of Monero. Mexi, there's a bunch of like 4 or 5 different exchanges that have recently delisted Monero. Or actually, no, they withheld withdrawals. They haven't delisted it completely, but they withheld withdrawals. What's going on there? Do you guys have an idea of what's going on there? That they're withholding withdrawals of Monero from many exchanges.
Yeah, I actually noticed this on another exchange, and this was over a week ago, actually, when there was first some of these headlines about the upcoming, or I guess back when Qubic was threatening the 51% attack and saying that they would, I think it was back when they said on August 2nd, we will execute the 51% attack. And then they like expanded their window to like the whole month of August, I think. But back then there was, I noticed at least one exchange that was not allowing deposits or withdrawals of Monero, and it said due to recent news headlines or something. And it was a minor exchange, a safe trade, I believe, but which is not very well known. I think they have other small cap coins, or they have Tari. Actually, they were one of the early ones to list Tari, which is how I was aware of them. But But yeah, as far as large exchanges, to my knowledge, I think Kraken had a brief outage, but they're, as last I checked earlier today, they're still online, fully operational with Monero deposits and withdrawals. And then as far as other exchanges, I did notice there were some other ones that did have some outages. Tuxsudo, you probably have more details on that.
No, I mean, I kind of noticed the same thing. Yeah, Kraken's the one that and this is kind of how I know Kraken's more legit, is that they're really good about this. I checked multiple times during this whole thing, and you could deposit and withdraw, but they were taking the proper precautions and requiring 10 confirmations, which is totally fine. But there was a lot of exchanges that did disable deposits and withdrawals, to my knowledge, altogether. And you could say maybe that's out of safety, but withdrawals makes a lot less sense than deposits. Disabling deposits, or at least making them require full 10 confirmations, makes total sense. Disabling withdrawals is a little more questionable. Now, maybe they actually were convinced that Qubic was going to do a 51%, and in that sense, yeah, you might do that to try and prevent people from moving funds during a time that might be questionable. But it is interesting that by doing that, they're basically forcing people to only sell. I mean, people could buy if they wanted to, but during this time, if people wanted to withdraw due to fear of having their Monero on the exchange, they can't do that. To get rid of it, they have to just sell it. And we've seen this happen in the past with especially Binance. Binance was notorious for basically not holding any Monero at any time. And eventually, when they decided they were going to remove it, they disabled withdrawals incredibly quickly, forcing people to sell because people wanted to get their coin off of Binance because they're going to remove it. And then they disabled withdrawals for, I think, weeks on end, forcing people to sell, basically causing a false price movement, essentially.
At the same time, guys, we see that there's a lot of energy being put in by some of the top BTC developers around that work with BitVM, promoting the idea that the Lightning Network is more private than Monero, to the point that just a week or two ago, we had a debate on Monero Talk. And I thought that was kind of strange that so much emphasis is going on trying to, it's almost like the BTC crowd really feels as if, and it's not just any BTC crowd, it's the BTC crowd that is heavily backed by venture capital. They feel threatened by Monero. The fact that they feel like it's important for them to send out developers like Super Testnet to debate, to make that claim, which is ludicrous, that the Lightning Network is more private than Monero. It's ridiculous. So that's really eye-opening, right? It makes me question motives and what's really going on here. And at the same time, we have a character like Nick Fuentes going out on the national stage, who now he has a huge audience, a huge following. I'd say that he's probably the most significant figure in politics right now in general. And he's shilling Monero to his audience. And I think he's going to continue to shill Monero to his audience because he sees value in Monero. And he himself talked about how Monero has been attacked and is being attacked. So many things are just happening. A lot of energy is moving around Monero. And what do you guys think? Do you guys suspect that this is part of a coordinated effort to try to hurt the network? Is that a gut feeling that you guys have as well, or is this all just happenstance, coincidences?
I mean, we know that there's been, if you follow Body Anarchist, he's done tons of deep dives. He's got so much useful information. He's done a lot of investigation into the legitimate price suppression of Monero by exchanges, like I mentioned, like Binance. So we know there has legitimately been some coordinated attacks against Monero to try and make it less interesting. Because if they can just keep suppressing the price, if they can prevent it from pumping during these bull runs, and if they can get people, for instance, this whole Qubic thing, if you look at it by itself, it might just look like some individual trying to make a quick buck or screw with the community. But if you take a broader look at things and you see all these other things going on, it does start to paint a larger picture that there might be some coordination going on. It might be a more orchestrated attack than what we initially would realize. Attacking basically the trust in the network, attacking the price at the same time. Basically trying to maybe not destroy it outright, but kind of shun it out of the limelight, right? Try to put so much fear out there that people suddenly become less interested in it and kind of just stick it in a corner over here to try and keep it from becoming too popular. And I think in a lot of ways they've been successful about that. And I think in some ways they haven't been. And I think it really went against that when we saw that BTC hacker who attempted to swap what I believe was around $300 million. I think he only got around 30 million. He tried to swap that into Monero, and suddenly the price absolutely skyrocketed, and Monero got more media attention than it ever had in, I think, the last couple years. So I think they want to prevent that from happening. So if they can't suppress the price, they're going to now go after the network and try to have people lose faith in the network, lose trust in the network. Because if they can convince, like you were saying, if they can convince people that Lightning is more private than Monero, then you won't see something like this happen again, where people are going to swap tons of Bitcoin into Monero for safekeeping or for hiding funds, or, it doesn't have to be malicious. But if they can spread enough propaganda and FUD, they might prevent that from happening in the end. And, we've seen this in the past with Binance holding paper Monero and basically selling and shorting Monero, buying it at certain times and selling it, stuff like that. So is it actually coordinated? It's hard to fully know. Hopefully more information will come out about Qubic and, where their actual funding is. We have some hints. We don't fully know. But it's very possible because, the state doesn't like Monero. It goes against everything they want to do. They're okay with Bitcoin because of how traceable it is. We know this. And even cryptos like Ethereum and Bitcoin that are initially traceable, that have some privacy tools, they've gone after those privacy tools individually. Now it's going to be a lot harder to go after Monero, but if they're going to do it, some of these things they're doing is having a little bit of effect. And I'd love to hear from Mr. X if he wants to add to that.
Well, yeah, a lot of the chain of events, including like the trade ogre going down mysteriously for, I guess, what's been more than a couple weeks now, I think, because it was late July when it went down without any explanation officially. Lots of rumors though, but some people are thinking that maybe they're dumping coins, or maybe there was a government seizure action that occurred. But I did see, in regards to the trade order, I did see there was the Arkham Intel blockchain analytics firm had mapped out what they believe to be the trade ogre wallets for obviously the transparent surveillance coins, but all the privacy coins, those are all, we don't really know what's going on with those. And I did hear rumors about Monero being dumped, or I mean, it was dumped, I guess, shortly after that happened. But some people are saying that maybe they sold the trade ogre operators may have dumped their holdings or customer holdings in that action potentially. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of rumors going around about all this stuff. But yeah, I agree. The kind of all these events kind of lining up and happening around the same time, attacking the network itself, and then attacking the privacy, and then also you have like the Samurai Wallet developers coming to this recent guilty plea agreement there, which is not good for, even though it doesn't really carry precedent, I guess, because it wasn't adjudicated by the judge, but it was rather just this plea agreement. That still is not good because it's just kind of putting that idea out there that these software developers who simply make peer-to-peer self-custody cash are, any of these privacy-preserving projects are viewed as suspicious. So even though I guess the one thing there is that they did make profit off of and it was more of a centralized protocol rather than Monero, which is completely decentralized and there's no profit that's made by the developers. But in any case, though, I think just that idea that privacy is somehow tainted and a bad thing rather than a fundamental human right is definitely, I think, part of the the state's attack against Monero in a more roundabout way, I guess. Even though, but then of course we have obviously with the with this Qubic, there's definitely a lot of speculation of is that like this, like a government that's behind that, or where's the funding coming from? But that's definitely another angle of attack, which is the network itself.
So my question is, an entity with more resources, couldn't they spin up more GPUs and CPUs and cause even a bigger attack? A lot the way that Qubic is showing them that it is possible.
Yeah, potentially. And that's I think one of the good things that actually comes out of this. Because ultimately, if Qubic can't actually get to a 51%, they kind of have helped us in a way. Like these attacks on Monero, these are not new. We have these things happen, every quite often actually. But I don't know if you remember last year, there was a transaction spam attack, which was maybe a black marble attack. We don't really know, but there was a very, very large amount of transactions that occurred in a very short period of time for like very, very low fee. And there was some bugs discovered with how fee calculation was handled and ended up getting fixed. So ultimately, it did improve the resiliency. I'm hoping that we see that happen with Qubic as well. We already have people like Luke Parker, who's one of the more prominent Monero developers. He's the lead developer of Sarai. But he's done a lot of work for Monero in the past, and he opened a kind of a meta issue discussing potential ways that we can make the network more resilient to a 51% attack if that were to happen, like using stuff like a finality layer or allowing GPU mining, stuff like that. But that is one of the concerns that does come up from this, is that in reality, Monero's hash rate is relatively low, and it is relatively inexpensive for an individual, or like especially like the state, right? So like an organization like Qubic is one thing, but then the state, it is relatively inexpensive if they wanted to screw with the network, or if they even wanted to try to go for 51%. They could undoubtedly do it if they really wanted to. And then that raises the question of, well, what do we do to deal with that? And, one of the things that people have been doing is promoting mining, trying to get people to use peer-to-pool, which is basically a decentralized pool, and then renting hash rate, which all these things help. All these things help, sure. But there's probably something else that we can do to further make it resilient, like maybe making fees higher to incentivize miners to use, mine Monero instead of going to Qubic. And then maybe using some of these things that Luke Parker brought up, like the finality layer. I think that was one that was prominently talked about in one of the recent Monerotopia episodes. So there are some things that are being investigated, looked at to try and make this better. Like the one thing that you can do right now, if you're just someone who's like looking into this conversation, is just, if you got a computer sitting around, especially if it's a reasonably powerful one, like a gaming computer, just start mining on peer-to-pool. Assuming that your electricity isn't too expensive, start mining peer-to-pool, and you'll get some KYC-free Monero. It's not like you're just spending money to put all this hash rate on a network. You're actually getting something back. Now, you may or may not make profit, but you are getting KYC-free Monero, which, in my opinion, is quite invaluable.
Yeah. So has there been any conversation of maybe has anyone brought up the issue of that maybe RandomX was a bad idea, and that Monero shouldn't have been ASIC resistant, shouldn't have gone that route? Because there are many, when we moved into RandomX back then, a lot of people in Monero were, did not want to go the ASIC resistant route. Has that come up in conversation?
Yeah, that was one of the options that was raised on Luke's meta issue, was the possibility of allowing ASICs or going to a different algorithm. But I think it carries, some different issues, but it carries some similar issues in a way to where it can become very centralized very quickly. Ironically, one of the advantages of Monero's hash rate being low is that it is easier for you at home to make a difference. Now, obviously, having the hash rate be lower is, ultimately could potentially be a problem, but it does allow you to make a difference, because the best thing to mine Monero on is literally an AMD Ryzen consumer processor. So at home, you can actually make a reasonable difference. With Bitcoin, what we see is that you got to spend $10,000 to make any meaningful uh, uh, hash rate because of the ASICs and the centralization that's become around that. So that has been discussed, but I'm sure Mr. X has something he can say on that, add that as well.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that ASIC idea is on the list. If you look at GitHub on the Monero project research lab section on GitHub, there are one of the most recent issues from Kai Abenerv or Luke Parker is he has a table which, as Tuxsudo mentioned, the finality layer is the first one that was there, and then he also has several other solutions like including the ASIC proof of work. But as Tuxsudo said, that is the problem with if Monero was to switch completely over to that, then there would be a risk of that centralization. And then actually one of the things, if we go back a few years, I remember when they had the, I think it was the Bitmain, I can't remember, I forget what the name of the model was, but it was that so-called ASIC for Monero that has
the X5, right? The Antminer X5.
Yes, Antminer X5. That's the one. And it had like a bunch of these powerful CPUs on it that gave, I forget how many kilohashes. It was quite a bit, but it was pretty at the time. I think they were selling it at like a loss, actually. Allegedly, from what I heard, but the problem with that though, they actually mined with those devices secretly before they sold them. So they sold a bunch, and people found like dust inside the chips and stuff, and how proving that they had been used. And also, it was pretty obvious too from looking at the hash rate data that they were mining with those devices before they sold them. So that is another risk, that you could have some mining company secretly mining, or even if they were bribed by the government, they could use it to attack Monero. So I think that's definitely a risk if we were to switch to something like that. But another thing that I was just thinking of, and I had briefly discussed with Raphael, was looking at Pirate Chain. I know it's kind of, at least in most of the Monero community, is kind of thinks of it as kind of, not everybody, but there's some that kind of disregard it as kind of a joke, but or not really serious. But I think the idea of the delegated proof of work, if we were to like look into that more, if I know that they have notarized their blockchain at irregular intervals on Komodo, and then also on, I think, Litecoin as well. So in order to try to reorganize or do deep reorganizations past those intervals, they would not be able to do it unless they were to overpower both of those other blockchains' hash power. So an attacker would actually have to attack all three networks simultaneously to override those transactions. So I was just wondering if that is another idea that maybe could be added to that. Of course, this is something that would probably be best to ask opposed to Monero Research Lab. That's just another idea I thought of that might be worth looking at.
Yeah, I guess one of the main, maybe not a concern, but one of the upsets of that would be similar to the suggestion like on Luke Parker's table, which was merge mining with Litecoin, is that in a way you kind of become partially beholden to that network as well, even if there's added security. I know Monero wants to be survive on its own, essentially, fully decentralized in its own network. So you could maybe get security from another network, but you're kind of partially becoming beholden to them as well. So it's, has its own pros and cons.
Well, yeah, I know Pirate Chain, one of the things that they've talked about is that even if Komodo and Litecoin were both to become obsolete or no longer used, then that wouldn't cause Pirate Chain to stop working. They would no longer have that added security. So they wouldn't have to attack those. It would just default to just using I guess, Pirate Chain's proof of work itself. I think Equihash is what they use, if I recall correctly, which is the same as what Zcash uses for their proof of work algorithm. But anyway, just an idea I thought might be worth looking at or looking into further.
So it seems to me like the big issue here is financial incentives. And in crypto, the financial incentives can change overnight. I think that something as easy as a meme, looking at Monero as a meme could drive up the price and help secure the network. So it really comes down to being creative. And it is concerning that maybe a state level actor could um, jump in and cause damage in the way that Qubic has. So my question is like, what's the timeline? What is so I see Kayaba Nerve is putting out these proposals. What is the process of going through these proposals, and how will the community come to a consensus in figuring out what to do next, how to mitigate any possible risk into the future?
I imagine Mr. X can probably give a better answer than I can, but I know there has to be, my understanding is that there has to be a consensus with the core team. And if it is something that requires a hard fork, they'll have to plan that out, either doing a different scheduled hard fork one sooner if it's, something that needs to be addressed earlier, or maybe doing it with the existing planned hard fork if it's something that requires a hard fork.
Yeah, from my understanding, a lot of these, I mean, people interested can just go on like Matrix or IRC even or whatever to just share it in the various chats. Like jump in the Monero. There's official chats I think linked from the official Monero website where people can jump into these actual discussions with the people that were mentioned, like Luke Parker and other members of the research lab or core team. You can jump in those conversations and share these ideas and discuss them.
So when I read what the top dev at Qubic is saying, he's saying that he's actually helping the Monero community get ready for any would-be state-sponsored attack. What are you guys' thoughts about that? Could this guy be actually benevolent, helping out the Monero community?
Well, that would be more plausible if they weren't just straight up lying about their statistics and what they're doing and causing all this FUD. Ironically, he could end up being right if we end up doing something that greatly improves the 51% resistance. But I have a really hard time believing that, seeing what they were saying earlier. Earlier on, they were saying a lot more threatening things. I don't have exact quotes, but I do distinctly remember them trying to come out as a threat in a way. And now they've kind of backtracked and they're like, oh, we're actually helping Monero. And I have a hard time believing that because of them lying about them actually 51%ing. Because if they were actually trying to help Monero, they wouldn't try to also drive the price down. And they also would be giving this hash rate to peer-to-pool. Instead of having their own pool, they would start giving a bunch of hash rate at peer-to-pool. Now, maybe they're, like you're saying, he's trying to help it to prepare us for a state attack. But once again, it doesn't make sense why he's lying about this 51%. There's no reason to do that. If he's actually trying to help Monero, there's no reason to lie about them 51%ing, attacking it. The only reason I could think of doing that is, once again, to try and add distrust in Monero as a network and to pump the Qubic coin and make Qubic mining even more profitable. And, there's some other theories potentially, like he's in bed, Qubic is in bed with some of these exchanges that delisted Monero, and the Qubic coin is on these exchanges that delisted Monero, and maybe there's something going on where they're trying to fill a bunch of Monero shorts to make people money. I don't really know. But there's a lot of potential theories about why or what they're doing and why, but I have a really hard time believing that they're actually trying to help Monero, just because of the fact of what all they're lying about. They've been lying about a lot of stuff, their hash rate, their 51% attack, and every time they do and then they get caught lying, they just kind of backtrack like they're doing now. They're like, oh, the reason why we didn't actually do anything bad is because we're actually trying to help Monero. We don't want to hurt it. But in reality, they couldn't do anything bad because they didn't actually 51% it. So I just have a hard time believing that. It's a little bit funny.
So it makes me very happy that the culture of Monero is now something that doesn't seem will ever change, and that these newer generation of contributors have carried on the legacy of what it means to be part of this network, of carrying on with that honesty. And just notice how you yourself looked for honesty as the litmus test as to like, can we trust it, right? And so which is the complete opposite of what Qubic is portraying, right? So it's the culture is so important, in all of this. Um, Tuxsudo, are you there? Okay, yeah. Your screen froze for a second. Um, we are about a month away from the Crypto Vigilante Summit, where we're going to talk about what matters most in crypto. And I'm pretty sure this topic is going to come up. And my question to you guys is like, what do you guys expect a month from now? How do you guys, what do you guys expect to be resolved, or how will this evolve in the upcoming month?
I'm hoping that Qubic is less of a threat. Obviously, we don't really know what's going to happen. Once again, they have that halving on August 20th. That'll make mining Qubic, a good amount less profitable. And then, of course, it also depends on what the price of the token is. Apparently, they're going to attempt another attack Thursday, well, tomorrow, basically. So I'm ramping up some mining rigs to, try and offset some of that. Because you got to remember that every hash rate that you add, they have to basically double that. So even if you're adding, maybe you think you're not adding that much, maybe you're adding like 10 kilohash. Well, suddenly they have to have another extra 20 kilohash to basically make up for that. So every little bit matters. But if you want to actually make a decent difference, I would say rent some mining rigs. You can easily do this from, I think it's called miningrogrentals.com. You can get quite a lot of hash rate for cheap. So that's a decent way to put a dent in there. But if you have spare hardware sitting around, just use it. Mine peer to pool, get paid some Monero. But yeah, hopefully the situation will cool off a bit. It seems like they're going to try ramping up some more attacks. So I guess we'll have to see what happens.
And so these attacks are going to be attempting the same, what they already did, or what are they threatening to do?
That's my understanding. I think they might be doing some more things to try and hide their hash rate a little bit. Some people are like basically spying in their Discord. I'm not in there, and they have a little more details as to what they're planning next. I'm not actually in there. But my understanding is that they're going to continue performing this attack, doing the selfish mining, and that's something I want to also mention. The reason why they are such a problem, like as we see right now, we do have some pools that have pretty large hash rate, which is not as ideal, but it's not as big of a deal. For instance, the top pool, I think, has around 29-30% of the total hash rate, but it's a legit pool that's been around for a long time, and they, to my knowledge, have never done any funny business. The reason why Qubic is able to do so much screwy stuff with just 35 to 40% hash rate is because of their selfish mining strategy. Basically, they're mining on their own. Right? They're not mining in combination with these other people. They're kind of mining blocks on their own. And if they can come up with blocks sooner than the other pools can, they can kind of stack them in a way in which they can deliver them to the network. And suddenly the network has to reorg because it sees that there were these valid blocks that were mined before the other pools did. And that's kind of what causes this whole issue with the reorgs, is because they're going out of their way to mine in this selfish manner. So I imagine they're going to continue trying that. They might have something else up their sleeve. I haven't seen anything about that. I don't know if Mr. X has any extra information about what kind of attacks they might be planning.
Well, I saw FUD about empty blocks, but I think that might have just been because the mempool was empty, because there was, there just weren't any transactions at that time. So, or when some of them were found, but I did see people fudding about, oh no, they're mining empty blocks on Monero and holding back people's transactions and stuff. I'm not sure that was entirely accurate, but yeah, I did see the 6 and 7 reorgs, but as you mentioned earlier, they were below that 10 block lock time, which is there for a reason. So I'm not super worried about it, but I would say, yeah, like you mentioned, going up to August 20th, I would definitely be watching, and like you mentioned, if they're threatening something tomorrow, just firing up some more Ryzen or whatever processors you might have available to help defend. And actually, this is interesting, and I should also mention to do that easily for people who might not be comfortable with command lines. There's a open source tool called not even sure how you pronounce it, but if it's Gupax or gupax.io is the website. And it is a GUI for mining Monero on a P2 pool using XMR or XM rig or mining software. So, and it does it pretty efficiently if you have the hardware for that. So, so I do recommend checking that out.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put that in the description below, Mr. X. If you could please DM me the link to that. And again, what I really want to know is, like, how concerned are you guys with this whole Qubic thing over Monero? Are you guys concerned at all, or not really, or what's going on?
I mean, Qubic themselves is a little bit concerning. But I think, like, outside of Qubic, like, just seeing this happen kind of raises some bigger questions about how we can become more resilient. So Qubic overall, they're a concern. But I'm nowhere close to saying, like, oh, it's over, like they're gonna destroy the network. This was bound to happen at some point. So ultimately, like, this will, I do strongly believe this will turn into something beneficial for Monero. Whatever Qubic's purpose might be, I do believe this will turn into something beneficial, because as you see, when attacks start happening, that's when, so to speak, the gang gets together. But we see a lot of either previous developers or current developers start getting together, talking about solutions, how to improve the network, make it more resilient. So I do strongly believe that this will be beneficial. Like, the numbers they're getting to is definitely a little bit concerning, but like Mr. X was saying, I think the home stretch really is over the next week before that August 20th, because that halving will significantly affect Qubic's profitability. If I'm understanding, that's the day they're going to do it. That's what I've heard. So they'll have a lot to make up with that in price if they, want to maintain the same profitability. And just got to keep spreading the word about mining, really. Yeah, it's not the most profitable thing right now. So it's kind of hard to get people on board, because people, they want to be able to make profit on it. And Monero mining isn't really profitable right now, unless you have, like, access to free electricity, and then, totally is. So getting more people aware of the fact that it's actually really easy to mine, like Mr. X once again brought up Gupax. I use Gupax on several of my systems. It's a lot nicer than setting up all the terminal tools. It's very easy. It's like 1-2 clicks to set up. So if you're scared of doing it, don't be afraid. It's super easy. And you can run it on basically any system, Linux, Mac OS, or if you've got like a Windows gaming computer run around, that's the perfect thing you can use to mine Monero in your idle time. So kind of just getting the word out, and then also dispelling the FUD too. I've been spending probably way too much time trying to do that. But dispelling the FUD when you see it, because while it doesn't affect like everything, seeing all of these journalists and all these reports of like 51% attack does have an effect on the price. And as we can see, it has been. Like, there's probably some other stuff going on, like maybe TradeOrg is selling off, we don't know. But it does have an effect on the price. And even if like retail doesn't care that much, this is all the institutional investors see, right? They see like this news of this 51% attack, and then that looks really bad. And I do have knowledge that retail actually is largely buying Monero, and retail largely has not been FUDed, because I do have knowledge that, so within Cakewallet specifically, a lot of our swap providers have actually seen an uptick in Monero exchanges and swaps, and not off-ramping Monero, but actually getting Monero. So they've actually seen an uptick in getting Monero during this price drop. So a lot of retail's taking advantage of it. And so I think that plays into the further part of how Monero really is just... it's really one of the only used cryptos. Like, it's the only one that people actually take seriously for the original purpose of cryptocurrency. And it has reason. I would say it has, like, it's still relatively niche, but it has reasonable retail adoption, especially compared to other cryptocurrencies, which have like way larger market cap. So, I'm bullish on retail, but the price has been affected, and I'm sure there's a lot of larger investors that have kind of started to dump it based on this news. But I think it's just dispelling the FUD, getting people to mine, and then, talking about these solutions of what can we do to improve miner profitability. So maybe raising the fee, that's an option that's been talked about. And then these various things to try and limit the risk of a 51% attack as well. So we'll see more and more of this stuff come out as some of these developers, much smarter people, talk about some of these potential solutions, and hopefully we'll hear more about this soon.
Mr. X, what do you think? Are you concerned at all as to what's happening? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I largely agree with what Tuxsudo said. I'm not super worried, especially not. I mean, just based on the numbers and also the fact that Qubic has been basically lying for a lot of this time to get a lot of this news flow that's not even accurate about the saying that they successfully executed the 51% attack when that did not happen. But I think, but yeah, like it is kind of demoralizing for people that don't understand that is incorrect information they're looking at. Because when you look at it, like TradingView, for example, it does have a lot of these inaccurate news headlines all sitting there, and people think that is what's going on. So they're panic selling in some cases, for those who just don't understand what's actually happening. But yeah, I would say I do think it is going to take a bit for them. I mean, for Qubic, for them to try to accumulate, that's a lot more hash rate for them to get. So they'd either have to buy a lot of hash rate rented, or somehow convince a lot of miners to switch over to them. And I mean, I did see a video of a miner that was excited. This was like, I think a week ago or so, that they were all talking about how Qubic is paying out all this extra money and stuff. But I don't know, I mean, how much longer they can continue doing that, or these extra bonuses. So especially if there's a happening occurring, if that is correct, that's happening on the 20th, that's definitely going to cut those profits down. So, so yeah, I'm kind of in a wait and see approach, and definitely would encourage those to mine to help defend the network, of course. But also it is encouraging to see some of the discussions about the potential solutions, and I think, yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But as of now, like I said, they have not successfully executed a 51% attack at this point. So I'm not super worried, really that worried, I guess. And I do kind of think this is a time. I mean, if people are like trying to get into Monero, I mean, the price has dropped quite a bit, or pretty much almost in half from the all-time high of 420. Well, not all-time high, sorry, the recent high of 420. Back in May, I guess. So yeah, I would definitely think this is a time like Monero definitely could use some price support and in order for it to really become more profitable, the price does need to go up. So I would say, yeah, this is probably a good time to grab some Monero, and also to mine Monero.
Awesome. So giving your guys' experience with Monero, what do you guys expect to be the timeline for the devs to actually figure something out and execute it in the market where Monero is more protected from all of this nonsense?
I can't really speak to that directly. I'm not as, I guess, in with the developer side as some people, as maybe Mr. X is. But my guess is basically that all depends on what happens over the next week. If it does become like, oh yeah, this is getting pretty bad, I imagine they will try to figure something out pretty quickly. That can at least help alleviate the situation. Maybe not like, totally solve it. Just trying to prevent them from being able to get to that point of 51%. And I imagine if it turns out, well, if Qubic's really just been bluffing, they are totally enabled to provide a 51%. Because you're right, it is a lot of money. They're bleeding a lot of money to currently do these various attacks. I guess paying people out, and then spending all this extra money incentivizing. And if they were to go out of their way, let's say they didn't get a bunch of more miners on board and they didn't actually convert existing Monero miners to Qubic, which seems like they haven't been able to do a ton of conversion. They would have to spend a lot of money to add that extra hash rate themselves. And I think they would need around like 1.5, 2 gigahashes, depending on how much, like, I don't even think their hash rate they're representing is even true. So I think they would need even more than that, to be honest. But that would cost a lot of money. So I think it all just depends on what happens over the next week. If this thing is like they're bluffing and, I think it'll blow off, and then something will come along a little bit further down the line, maybe a few months, maybe along with the next hard fork, something that can improve. But in the short term, I could imagine fees getting increased fairly significantly, because that's an easy thing that can be done, that can very quickly make, depending on the transaction amount, that could help make miners more profitable, help incentivize mining. Some of these things that don't require a hard fork, I imagine those will be maybe prioritized in the event that it becomes a sketchy situation over the next few days.
Yeah, I'm actually just.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Say, Mr. X, I'm sorry, you were saying?
Oh, well, yeah, I was just checking on some of the chats there, and they were talking about how Qubic was allegedly renting hash rate and not even getting as much hash as anywhere close to the 51% level at least. But it just, yeah, I think it's definitely the FUD and the bots. There's definitely, I've seen evidence of bots all saying the same thing in support of Qubic, and then all trying to FUD Monero too. So it's like, there's definitely a campaign against Monero. That's definitely for sure. And personally, I think Monero is just going to come out stronger out of this thing. It's just really, this is kind of like a shitcoin really just trying to flex itself and pretend that, oh yeah, we can take down this multi-billion-dollar Monero, even though we're a few hundred million market cap. But I mean, I think it's just all, I mean, as evidenced by their lies from Qubic and inaccurate reporting. I think it's, yeah, they're trying to make a name for themselves, but I just ultimately don't think they'll really hurt Monero. But I do. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be vigilant, and we should continue, of course, mining. And this is an opportunity really to help strengthen Monero fundamentally. So I think I ultimately do think that is what's going to happen as a result.
Yeah, I personally think that what's going to carry Monero through this and through everything else is the adherence to the FOSS ethos and the honesty and the reverence that the community has to truth. So that's Monero's superpower, and that's what I know. Monero's in good hands. It's, I get the same vibe from everyone that I meet in the Monero community. They're just people that put their egos aside, and they're more ready to tell you anything, any possible thing that could go wrong with Monero than they are to show you how great Monero is. It's like, it's almost the backwards of every other culture that I've encountered in crypto. And it is that culture which makes it very special, a very special environment. So I'm personally not that worried, but I do want to follow up on this as it continues, because something that I learned from I lived through the Bitcoin Civil War, and I was a big blocker. And what I learned was that the technology doesn't matter as much, the economics doesn't matter as much. What drives things is what people think and how they're informed, and FUD can cause a lot of damage. So it's very important to have these conversations. And I look forward to having you, Tuxsudo, at the Crypto Vigilante Summit coming up on September 12th, where you're going to be showcasing Cake Wallet. And I look forward to your presentation. This is going to happen again Friday, September 12th. Everyone's welcome to join at tcvsummit.com. All of the description is in the notes below here of this video. And any final thoughts regarding this whole situation with Monero and Qubic before we leave? Tuxsudo?
I think we had a good talk about the situation, potential solutions, and what's going on. But yeah, just the TLDR. Like we said, mine if you can, if you have a spare system. If you want to throw, there's a lot of people saying, how can I throw money at this? Go rent some hash rate on miningrentals.com. You can get quite a lot of hash rate for pretty low money. And dispel the FUD, explain to people what's going on. Like you were saying, we want to be truthful, but we also want to dispel the FUD. So like, we are being realistic about, Monero's potential downsides, ways it could be attacked, but at the same time, we do want to dispel the FUD at the source. And this is a lot of FUD. There's concern, but the 51% attack is a lie. So if you see that, you've got the information now, and you can look at this data yourself. Dispel that, which will help, I guess, ensure trust in the network and let people know that, hey, it's not actually that bad. It's not over. And to know that, I mean, something like Monero, it's got a lot of good people behind it. And like you were saying, I'm sure it's going to be just fine. I think it's going to get better. So
Awesome. Mr. X?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And actually, one thing, speaking of Cake Wallet and wallets in general, another area of FUD that came up today was the news about the Google Play Store banning wallets that don't have a banking license, which initially was a bit worrisome, but then, of course, thankfully, after the the outrage about that, people, or I guess Google clarified that this would only apply to non-custodial wallets. So thankfully, we won't have to, I guess, bypass the Play Store and download the APK or a Crescent or other solutions to download some of our favorite wallets like Cake Wallet, for example, which I use very often. But yeah, just another interesting FUD issue that arose today as well that I thought I'd mention.
Awesome, guys. So I hope everything gets solved as soon as possible. And yeah, I think that I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you for coming on, Tuxsudo. Thank you for coming on, Mr. X. And until we meet again, peace, love, anarchy. Take care. Bye.
Now we are dealing with a possible world war. Some will say we are already in a world war. My condolences and prayers go out to everyone suffering under tyranny. It really sucks. I'm really sorry. But it seems as if people are starting to wake up regarding crypto more and more each day. And so it's in the description right here to read, where we give our secret sauce and what we teach our subscribers, because things are just that bad. Everyone needs this information. People need to know about sound cryptocurrencies that are actually private by default, and to know how to properly use crypto.